Hello. Listen, we are talking about cluster feeding. If you are pregnant and you are looking to breastfeed, then you want to definitely tune into today's episode. I'm going to be talking about cluster feeding. And listen, cluster feeding can feel almost like an endless cycle of breastfeeding, but it is completely normal and it does have its purpose. By the end of the live today, I'm going to help you figure out how to be able to manage it. I am going to share what cluster feeding is, why babies do it, and I'll give you some practical tips to help you handle it without going into a state of insanity. So if that sounds like something that could benefit you, that would be of value, then I welcome you to stay tuned so that we can hop in and get into the juicy ins and outs of breastfeeding and cluster feeding specifically. If this is your first time joining me on a live or on my channel in any episode, my name is Stephanie Poole. I am your go-to certified doula and lactation consultant, and I help pregnant women, first-time moms specifically, transition into motherhood. So I help you birth and breastfeed with confidence, okay? So outside of today's live, I welcome you to the family to subscribe, to stay tuned so that you can pretty much birth like a boss, basically. Okay, so now that we've gotten all of the formalities out of the way, I have a lot on my schedule today. I'm a mom, you're gonna be a mom. So I felt like we could just hang out and chit chat while I am getting ready. So I have my trusty pad here that I'm gonna be referring to for notes per usual. And I am going to be just throwing on some makeup to get things going and to be able to move on with my day to day. So let's start with y'all. Now, why when I jump on live, now I have a scratchy throat. Okay, excuse me. And listen, by the way, when you join, make sure you let me know where you're joining from. And by the way, I am repping my city, the Detroit Pistons. Underneath, I have my Detroit Lions. Our playoff game, the other day was absolutely amazing. We are having a fantastic season, and hopefully we will be at the Super Bowl. So yeah, rep your city in the comments. Let me know where you are joining me from. Hello, hello, hello. So, okay, we are talking about cluster feeding today. How many of you plan on breastfeeding? Can you please drop me in the comments if you plan on breastfeeding? I just want to know who I'm talking to today. So let's start with what is cluster feeding. Cluster feeding is when you breastfeed more frequently in a shorter period of time. So if you've never breastfed before, you might be thinking, well, how often is that? Breastfed babies normally feed every 2 to 3 hours. That is the cycle of most newborn babies. Formula-fed babies do every 3 to 4 hours, okay? So with that being said, cluster feeding can look like more frequently. So instead of 2 to 3 hours, more on that 3-hour schedule. Most babies are on the 3-hour schedule or close to it. But cluster feeding could mean that you are feeding almost every hour. So let me just kind of back up. I work on labor and delivery. I work with a lot of first-time moms. And usually if I go in to see a mom and it is like the baby is, let's say, about a day old. So they've already been born and this will be their first night. Maybe they were born earlier in the morning. A lot of times the moms will say, oh my gosh, the baby was just feeding all night last night. That is cluster feeding. And what happens is the babies are starting to wake up from birth. So birth is very, very intensive. And usually mom and baby are both super tired after birth. And so newborn babies eat, but they don't eat as much typically as they normally do, because after birth they're tired. So they kind of nurse, but then they kind of fall off to sleep. But come nighttime, when they're starting to wake up, then they go into this cluster feeding. Cluster feeding also happens again when your baby hits growth spurts. So it happens to regulate your milk supply and when your baby is going through a growth spurt. Are we all clear on that? Cluster feeding is when your baby is feeding more frequently in a shorter amount of time, right? And it happens when, in the beginning, when you are regulating your milk supply, and it also happens when your baby is going through a growth spurt. Those things are very important to understand because it kind of helps you to get through that initial notion of, oh my gosh, my baby is up every hour on the hour eating. Yes, they are. They are likely going through a growth spurt, and consider it a blessing because, like I said, it helps you to regulate your milk supply. Now, I want to know if you're on here and you have breastfed, or if you're pregnant, is this your first pregnancy? Have you breastfed before? Or will this be your first time breastfeeding? That's always interesting to know. All right, so you might want to, let me just back up and say, a lot of times when I go in to do consults for moms of newborns, because the baby is eating so much, moms will ask me, like, I don't know if my baby is getting enough milk. I don't know if my baby is getting enough milk. Your baby is likely getting more than enough. There are very few times when I go into a mom's room and the baby is not getting the milk that they need. They are making the transfer of the colostrum. Nice deep sucks for at least a minimum of 10 minutes lets us know that there's some transfer of colostrum there. And so the other way you know is when the baby starts to fall off to sleep, when their hand starts to relax. Those are all signs that your baby is transferring the milk and that they are getting enough and are satisfied. But you might be wondering, well, why are they eating so much? They're eating so much because they are likely going through a growth spurt, and you need that. Your body physically needs the stimulation of the frequent feedings in order to up that milk supply. So the number one way to increase milk supply is with stimulation of the breast. So every time your baby eats, they're not just eating, right? They are also telling your body to make more milk. And so with that being said, it's good to have those cluster feeds. I know it can be kind of stressful to be feeding so often. And, you can kind of feel like, oh my gosh, how in the world, what is going on? Is my baby getting enough food? They are getting enough food, and you actually need that stimulation so that your body can get the message that it needs to make more milk. Now, let me kind of give you a little bit of background just on breastfeeding, because when you understand this, it makes sense, the process of how everything works. When your body empties the milk from your breast, right? When it goes into factory mode and it's making milk and it's dispensing the milk, that regulates or tells your body, okay, this baby's eating, we have to make more milk. If you don't stimulate your breast often, especially in the first 4 weeks, somebody put 4 in the comments. If you are not stimulating your breast frequently in the first 4 weeks, you are not regulating your milk supply or building your milk supply. Is super important to continue to stimulate in those first 4 weeks so that you can set the tone for your milk supply. Okay? So these cluster feeds are doing more than just feeding your baby. They are also telling your body that the baby is now born, right? The baby has now been born. You're not pregnant anymore. And that you need to be making milk. That's what these cluster feeds are doing. And at the same time, it's actually feeding your baby who is growing at a rapid pace, especially right after birth. Does that make sense? If it makes sense, somebody put a yes in the comments, please. Now, what can you do? Because what happens is moms are tired. They've given birth. They're learning this newborn baby. They are now tired, right? This is super, super common. And so I think, and this is why it was so important for me to do this live today, because I think it's what I find when I go into labor and delivery rooms, right, of moms who are now brand new as a new mom. They've just given birth. The problem is they don't have the proper expectation of what this entails to breastfeed. But the reason why you're different is because you will know in your mind and you'll be prepared, and therefore you're more likely to be successful in your breastfeeding journey because now you are going to know about cluster feeding. So let's talk about a few things. I'm referring to my notes here and trying to do makeup. Come on now. But let me just kind of go over 5 manageable tips to help you with cluster feeding. So the first one is hydration and nutrition. Staying hydrated and keeping snacks handy during cluster feeding sessions is going to help you to keep your energy up. It's also going to help support your body that is now working in overdrive. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? It is going to help you nourish your body because your body has to nourish your baby. If you are at a deficit, y'all, you cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot pour from an empty cup. Do we all understand that? All right. So the first thing is to stay hydrated and to nourish yourself properly. Once you do that, you need a comfortable setup. You are going to be, when your baby goes through these growth spurts and they are asking for more milk, especially in those first, how many weeks did we say? 4 weeks, when you are establishing your milk supply and your baby is going through those initial growth spurts, you need to be comfortable because you're going to be breastfeeding a lot. You're going to be breastfeeding a lot. And if you're not comfortable, you're less likely to do it and you're less likely to stick with it. So make sure that you set up a comfy area in your home where you can be comfortable when you're breastfeeding. Have like a little sitting area, a little nook. I believe I actually have a video on my channel that tells you like how to set up a little area, a little nook that will allow you to be comfortable when you're breastfeeding, because when you have to breastfeed a lot, the only way you're going to stay with it is if it's simple and easy. If it's a lot of fuss to it, you're not going to want to stick with it. So knowing that in advance and preparing, right, by having a good place set up for these feeds is going to make you more likely to stick with it. And your baby needs you to, you know. All right, so we talked about hydration and nutrition, and then we talked about having a comfortable setup. The next tip I want to give you for being able to handle these cluster feeds is to do a lot of baby wearing, especially in the initial stages of postpartum. So in those first 4 weeks, when you are trying to regulate and establish a healthy milk supply, your baby is going through these growth spurts. One way to make it simple and easy is not just to have a comfortable spot set up, which you can refer to my other video for. You also want to get in the habit of wearing the baby. So make sure you have a harness or the extended cloths so that you can have baby close by, and that makes you more mobile, right? You can be up and maybe get 1 or 2 tasks done while you're feeding the baby. Because again, we want to set you up for success. And you are more likely to do these things if you're more comfortable with it. Does that make sense? So if you can walk around with baby when you need to, or if you have a comfy spot for you and baby to feed when you need to, you are more likely to be successful with breastfeeding. Okay? So that was tip number 3. The next one is rest when you can. Now, this one is important because I think a lot of times women struggle after having the baby because we think we can still move and shake at the same pace we were moving and shaking before the baby. And you have to give yourself grace, especially in those early postpartum days. You have to. You have to. Your body is working overtime to repair and recover from birth, to produce milk for the baby. It's so much going on with your body. You have to take rest. So, especially while you're on maternity leave, maternity leave is not like this opportunity to get a bunch of stuff done. Maternity leave is really for you to rest, to relax, to renew yourself, right? After having the baby. That is important. You will notice if that's not happening. You will definitely notice. All right, so we talked about rest, baby wearing, all of that kind of stuff. The next one is just simply to ask for help. Ask for help. If you are struggling with breastfeeding, or if cluster feedings feel like a lot for you, then ask for help. Because if you have a supportive partner, which is very important, by the way, or some support system in place, like a family member, your mother, a good friend or coworker, whoever that person is for you, what you can do is designate for them to do some of the feedings, right? You can pump, and then you can give the baby from the bottle so that it does free you up to get some rest, or it does free you up to be able to do a few other tasks. But the key is to know that this is going to happen so you can prepare and be ready for it. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So let me just go back through, because I have, again, my notes here, and answer a few FAQs that I get a lot when I am doing consults, especially in the hospital, on labor and delivery. I told you one of the questions I get often is my baby getting enough milk during cluster feeding? Yes. You may think they're not getting enough, which is why they're so hungry. But that's not the case. They are getting food when you feed, and they are getting enough, but they are going through, likely 1 or 2 things are happening. If it's within the first 24 hours, which is usually when we see the first cluster feeding take place, usually it's in babies 24 to 48 hours old. And what happens is, again, they're really tired during birth, and so they sleep a lot afterwards. But then they start to wake up, and when they wake up, they start to feed more frequently. So that is one reason why. And the other reason why is because they are going through a growth spurt. So when they get about 2 weeks old, they'll start doing that cluster feeding. Every time they hit a milestone and grow, they put on weight and they kind of spurt out a little bit. You'll notice that they're feeding more frequently. And that is because they need that extra nutrition. They are getting enough, but they have to have a little bit more nutrition. And as they get older, you need that stimulation so that your body can keep up with the milk supply, right? You need to send signals to your body to say, okay, baby's in a growth spurt. I need a little bit more milk. How do you tell your body that? You tell your body by stimulating your breast, by either putting the baby to breast to latch, or by pumping. That's how we tell our body to make more milk. Okay? So your baby is getting enough milk. When does cluster feeding typically stop? It could last typically about a day or two. Every baby is different. So I don't want to just, say it will officially last for 6 hours. We don't know because babies are different. Every baby is different. But usually you'll see an uptake for a day, 2, I would say maybe 3 at tops. But usually it's a short period of time where they're frequently feeding. That is the overall general answer. So just be hopeful and have a more positive outlook that cluster feeding it's not something that lasts forever. When they do it, they get into this little cluster and then it mellows back out. So that, I hope that is helpful for you when we talk about y'all, I can't find half my stuff. When we talk about how long this will last, it's short term. Okay, so you only need to make these adjustments for a very short amount of time, and then things will taper back off and they'll go back to a regular feeding schedule. So some people ask, well, can I supplement during cluster feeding? And by supplement, sometimes people are asking because they're talking about supplement something to help with that milk supply. You can, but I would do it sparingly, because if you are indeed cluster feeding, meaning you are feeding frequently, that in and of itself is going to bump your milk supply. So you don't need a lot of supplementation. You need to supplement with things that are high fiber, like oats. I just did a video on this as well, so definitely check that one out. I'll have them linked below. But oats and nutritious foods, whole foods to help nourish your body. But you want to go light on any kind of, supplement out there specifically for milk production when you are cluster feeding. And the reason why is because you don't want to end up with an oversupply. When you hear people talk about mastitis or clogged ducts and all of this kind of, it's because there's an oversupply. And you don't want that. That could be painful. It can cause a lot of problems. And really, you can find yourself stumbling in your breastfeeding journey. And I don't want that for you. Your body miraculously will know how much to make and will make the exact right amount. That's what's so awesome about breastfeeding. Your baby, every time they feed, will get the right amount. Your milk is never, think of your body like this. I say this often when I'm doing consults, which is your breast are not, don't think of them as a warehouse. Think of it as a factory. What do I mean by that? A warehouse is, you have an inventory or supply. And when you run out, you have to fill the warehouse back up. No, a factory is an assembly line, and it just keeps making it. That is essentially what your breasts are doing with breast milk. You don't run out of a supply. You never have, if your baby, because that's another question too. Like, well, I just fed an hour ago and now the baby's hungry again. I don't know if I have enough milk. Baby, you always got milk because you're making it on demand. You'll never run out of breast milk. If they eat 10 times in a day, your body will make enough milk for 10 feedings in that day. If you do you get what I'm saying? So you never have to run out because you are not a warehouse, you're a factory. You will make it on demand according to your baby's needs. Does that make sense? Y'all, I cannot find anything, and I think it's because I'm trying to multitask. Okay, so you are definitely making enough milk. Your baby is getting enough. You don't necessarily need to supplement. If you do decide to supplement, I would do it sparingly because the mere fact that you are doing frequent feedings is going to bump the milk supply. That's the automatic reaction your body is going to have from doing frequent feedings. I hope this helps. If you have questions, definitely put them in the chat. So as a recap, let's just kind of go back over these 5 tips before I hop off here and finish what's going on here. So the first one is hydration and nutrition. Make sure that you are hydrated. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If your baby needs to eat, your body has to support you and the baby. So make sure that you are doing that by nourishing yourself well and being hydrated. Number 2 is a comfortable setup. Again, I will link the link below, but you need to have an area in your home that is a go-to area for you to be able to sit, rest, relax, and feed often. Okay, that's part 2. Tip 3 is baby wearing. Have a harness nearby, because if you are not able to sit and feed in that comfy spot, you need to be able to get up and get some tasks done, or whatever the case may be, then you need a harness to be able to do that. Okay, that is tip 3. Tip 4 is rest when you can. When you, especially in those first 4 weeks, getting in frequent feeds is important. So you got to make room for it. If you have committed to breastfeeding, then you have to commit to make room for it. That's just what it is. You have to make room for feeds and for pumps if you want a good, healthy milk supply. Because this is also something that people kind of think like, okay, I'll just take a supplement and that will bump my milk supply. It will initially, but then as soon as you stop, your supply is going to fall off, because the basis, the foundation of a good milk supply is stimulating your breast with either latching the baby or pumping. So you have to make room for that, because without that, you'll always be up and down. Your milk supply will go up, but then it'll kind of drop off again. And I've had moms who have literally stopped breastfeeding because when their milk supply went down, they didn't understand that you got to keep up with those pumps. And I can actually do another live where we talk about why those pumps are so important and how your body is receiving that information. Night pumps are very important. I mean, I can go into all of that if that's something that you guys are interested in. Definitely just make sure to like this video, and that'll let me know you want more information on that. I'm happy to go live and really just kind of get into all of that for you. But if you plan to breastfeed, you have to make room for stimulating your breast. Listen to this. This is what I tell all my patients before they are discharged. 8 or more in 24. Newborn babies eat anywhere from 8 to 10 times a day, and that's whether you are giving formula or breastfeeding. So don't think like, oh, breastfeeding is so much, maybe I should formula feed. No, newborn babies eat that much, period, across the board. So you are going to feed. You might be able to get rid of one feeding, but what's one feeding at this point, right? So in order to stick with those feedings and the newborn schedule, you have to make room to either latch your baby to the breast or to pump, because that is the number one way to establish a healthy milk supply. I cannot stress it enough. I literally give talks about this. I do consults about this. I'm at work every day, literally talking to new moms, telling them, there's a lot of stuff out on the market, but nothing will establish your milk supply, especially in the first 4 to 6 weeks, like consistent latching and pumping. Okay? The last thing I will say, we've talked about rest when you can, baby wearing, is to ask for help. I just want to reiterate this. If you are having a bump in the road, don't stop. Please don't stop. I get so many moms who they'll start out strong with me at the hospital, right? And then they're discharged home with the baby. And then they hit a bump in the road. And I always say, if you hit a bump, don't have the knee-jerk reaction and just stop. Reach out for help. As a matter of fact, and I just did a episode where I talked about the importance of incorporating a lactation consultant before you even have the baby, right? Because babies got to eat. They're gonna eat no matter what. They gotta get food in. And so you need to have someone that you know, that you like, that you trust, that you can reach out to and say, hey, I'm running into this issue. Can you help me with my next feeding? And having a lactation consultant on your birth team will help you in the beginning stages. So when you hit that rut, you don't give up. Because the benefits of you breastfeeding your baby is beyond what I have time to go into right now on this live. That's how important it is. That's how important it is. It is important for your baby's long-term health. I'm not just talking about the difference between formula and breastfeeding. Y'all can get on a tangent about this all day. The difference between breastfeeding and formula feeding is very different, because formula is formulated to sustain their hunger and growth. That's it, right? That's what formula does. It will, get your baby the vitamins and nutrients they need to grow. No problem. And we use it as a tool. As a lactation consultant in the hospital, if there's something going on with the baby that's not latching appropriately, maybe they have a tongue tie or some other kind of medical issue and they're not able to latch to the mom, we do use donor milk and formula to feed the baby. So I'm okay with that. But it does not measure up to breast milk. Breast milk is not just feeding your baby. It is sealing the gut of your baby. It is giving them healthy microbiomes. It is reducing their risk of certain cancers and childhood obesities. I'm telling you, it's so many benefits. I don't have time to go into that today. But what I'm telling you is worth you kind of fighting through and sticking with breastfeeding even outside of the cluster feeds, so that you can get your baby the nutrition and the long-term effects that come from breastfeeding. And I'll just say this and then I see a question. But I'll just say this. The longer you are able to stick with breastfeeding, the more benefits unlock for you. So there are certain benefits you get right off the jump, right? At newborn stage when your baby is the most vulnerable. But as time goes on and you continue to breastfeed, you start unlocking new benefits that happen because you've stuck with it for a longer amount of time. And so when you hit these little cluster blocks, it can be very, very task oriented. It can feel like a lot. Okay. I want you to stick with it because there is purpose in it. There is your baby is getting benefits that you can't manufacture. Okay. Really quickly to talk about foods. I have a video. I will be mindful to link it below. But you definitely want to hydrate well, and then also do things that have oats in them. So like oatmeal, chia seed is really good. Things that have omega-3s are good for sustaining your milk supply and the growth of your baby. And I say omega-3s because there's a such thing called DHA. Sometimes you'll even see it in some of the other things that they've put in, but it naturally occurs. And so you can do things that are, so besides the oats, besides hydration, besides chia seed, you could do salmon, and whole foods is going to be important. Whole foods. You don't want to eat a lot of processed foods when it comes to your milk supply, because your body has to be able to utilize those nutrients and extract them to then turn around and make the breast milk. So those are just a few off the top. Like I said, I will list the, that's a very good question, by the way. I love that you asked that. I will list the link for the other video below because I think you'll find it very helpful. And I have another video that kind of goes over the basics of breastfeeding. So I'll try to just make a little playlist in the link below that you guys can use and really hop into if you plan to breastfeed, because it's very, very important. Thank you so much. I really absolutely. Oh, hey, your name is Stephanie too. Oh, I love a good Stephanie. I am sending positive vibes your way, girl. Yeah, so breastfeeding is very important. I have a playlist. I will link it below. But stay the course, y'all. Stay the course. Cluster feeding can kind of be, it can be overwhelming. And that's why I'm glad you tuned in today. I'm so proud of you for tuning in today, because now you know it's hard when I'll be quick with this story. When I had my son and I was a first-time mom, I jumped in because I knew breastfeeding was good for me and my baby. Excuse me. But when I say I had no point of reference, I mean I had no point of reference. So I wasn't prepared. I didn't know what cluster feeding was. This was, of course, before I became a lactation consultant, before I was a doula. I worked in healthcare. I was familiar with the process, but I didn't have a point of reference. Y'all, it was the hardest thing ever. And I think that is why I have a commitment to teach moms about it, because I don't want you to have to struggle the way I struggle. I want you to be able to reach out and have resources to help you prepare for the birth before the baby is born. That is the most powerful time for you to learn about how to prep for birth, for you to learn how to, support yourself in postpartum, and for you to be aware of how breastfeeding works. The more you know before you have the baby will make your journey so much more easier. So I am going to hop off my soapbox right now. I have a ton of other things to do, a few consults to take care of. I absolutely enjoy hopping in, talking with you guys, and helping you through whatever issues you have so that you can birth like a boss. Hello. I don't want you out here struggling. So with that being said, if you have questions and you would like to work with me, I have 2 ways. You can book an intensive where I help you prepare for birth. And girl, I'm going to get you all the way together, okay? I take care of my mommies. The second way is to purchase my course, which is self-led. It has all the videos, the modules, the supporting PDFs for you to prepare your baby from birth to postpartum, all the way to breastfeeding. If that sounds like something that you can get value from, then I welcome you to click the link below to hop into Bump to Bundle Blueprint. Otherwise, it was an absolute joy to hang out with you today. I will see you tomorrow. I'm going to go live tomorrow again. You can actually hop off of this live and go to my channel. I'm going to be posting that here shortly. If you have not subscribed, what are you even doing? What are you doing? Subscribe. If you are pregnant and you are going to be having a baby soon, you need to subscribe to my channel. Go do it now, and then you'll get notifications for when I go live tomorrow. I'm super excited to see you guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, happy birthday, y'all. Bye.